Hello everyone, welcome to SLUGME 6 and we're here in Sydney, Australia, and my name is Taturevych and I'm joined here by Bill Murch. Hi Bill.
Hi Artem, it's good to be here with you.
Thank you for joining, Bill. And today we're going to talk about design automation, and in particular how to automate certain designs using three approaches: design table, DriveWorks, and Solidworks API. Okay, Bill, do you want to talk a little bit about agenda?
Sure. Okay. So we'll have a bit of an intro to introduce ourselves, basically. Then we'll have a bit of a chat about what is exactly design automation. It's a common phrase, but let's just discuss it a bit more. And then we'll look at, in turn, Artem will look at automation via a design table. I'll then look at automation via a product called DriveWorks, which you may or may not have heard about. And then Artem will look at automation via Solidworks API, in which he is an expert. Then we'll just wrap up with a little outro to finish off the day. So, look, you might just be wondering who's this talking, who's this Bill guy? Look, I have over 11 years experience with DriveWorks and Solidworks. I'm certified in both CSWP, CSWE, the 3 CDs. For DriveWorks, that's for Express, Solo, and Professional. I did work for an Australia, New Zealand Solidworks reseller for 12 years, from 2008 to 2020, various roles of tech support, trainer, solutions consultant, and DriveWorks product manager. But I've recently bitten the bullet and gone out working for myself. I have a company called IDM Consulting, and at the moment I'm working as a Solidworks and DriveWorks consultant. So that's about enough for me. What about you, Artem? Who are you?
Thank you, Bill. So my name is Artem Taturevych, and my main area of expertise is Solidworks API and Solidworks PDM API. And I have been involved with developing certain applications for over 13 years now. So I have started last year a company called Xarial, where I continue my passion in developing products for Solidworks and Solidworks PDM, and also doing some bespoke development. I also an author of codestack.net, which is a website with free tutorials and hundreds of macros, which you can use in your day-to-day job in SolidWorks. And I'm also a part of SolidWorks Champions program, and I'm a former development lead of SharpTask, which is a batch macro runner utility. So Bill, do you want to talk a little bit about design automation, what it is and why do we need it?
Sure thing. Thanks, Artem. Okay, so what is design automation? Look, in simple terms, you take an existing SolidWorks model or models and drawings, and you create new versions of them based on your inputs, some logic you define, rules you define, and parameters. Of course, why do you use it? Why would you want to go into design automation? Ultimate goals here. First of all, you will save time because you're automating things. You're making them happen faster. If you do that, you'll be able to save money, and eventually you should be able to make even more money, which is obviously what we're all about. Okay, so design automation. So what exactly does it do? How do we do it? Well, we automate the repetitive SolidWorks tasks. When you do that, you eliminate design errors because you're getting it right first time. You also eliminate expensive and time-consuming design changes, and you will also, of course, improve your product quality because you're getting it right. You don't have those errors coming through. The designers can then focus on innovation and development. They're not tied down doing the mundane things over and over again that they can do almost with their eyes shut. So they can build better things. But one thing people often don't know about with design automation, there's a sort of a sidebar to it where you can often also automate repetitive, what I call procedural tasks, such as generating documents. You can eliminate the errors. There's no typos in a simple way, but you can also automate layout and production of documents. So you're eliminating errors and you're improving the accuracy of those documents. So how do you do design automation? We're going to show you 3 ways today. As I mentioned before, Artem will look at SolidWorks design tables. I'll look at DriveWorks, and Artem will look at SolidWorks API.
Okay, thank you very much, Bill. I think it makes this topic a little bit clearer. So, and what we're going to show today as a practical demonstration is an automation of the design of the furniture. So in this particular case, we're going to automate design of cabinet. And in our task, we're going to allow users to enter some input parameters, such as width, height, depth, number of drawers, and also some other additional parameters such as type of door handles, materials, panels. We're also going to employ various different additional modules, such as ability to enter parameters directly from a web page, and also to drive your design based on SQL database. And before we go ahead, I also want to encourage you to participate in the live chat session. So myself and Bill are currently in the chat, and we will be able to answer your questions if you have any. So in the first demo, we're going to look how to achieve some design automation using built-in functionality in SolidWorks. And we're going to employ two fantastic features available for all users in SolidWorks. And one is a design table, and then we're going to use configuration publisher, which is using the design table to build a user interface, which users can use to provide their input parameters. So let me quickly jump to my SolidWorks. So the first challenge you need to do when you're talking about automation is to prepare your model so it fits the purpose of automation. So if I'm going to use design table, one of the first things I need to do is to make sure that all my driving dimensions are available at the top level document. So usually you would use assemblies. That means that you need to have those dimensions and on the assembly itself, which is a bit of a limitation of design tables. So because usually your driving dimensions actually reside in the parts. So you have two ways to achieve it. You can combine both ways. So first one is you can use in context relations. And for example, can link your sketch segment to another sketch segment. So in particular, for example, we can link the sketch segment which drives the shape of our door, which is the same sketch segment which is designed on the top level assembly. So in this case, we actually can drive that shape of the door from our assembly sketch layout, or we can use equations. So in my case, I actually go into the second way, and I just designed a number of equations which are going to drive my design. And in my assembly, I have a couple of layout sketches. So you can see there is a height, width, depth, and this segment corresponds to the width of my drawer. And I also have another layout segment, which actually going to drive the number of drawers here. So this number is driven by a local linear pattern. So basically, I could have used that number itself, but I just like to have everything into the sketches, so it will be easier for me to manage that in design table. And if I open my equations here, so if I go to Tools, Equations, so you can see I have quite a few equations here which are going to drive the other parameters based on my input parameters. By some reason, SolidWorks doesn't quite like it, so it says a potential circle reference, but there are actually no circle reference, and it's just going to work. So how that works, if I go into this design and, for example, just modify the value here to 1800, and let's say I'm just going to modify that parameter here to 4. So you will see that my design will be correspondingly updated. I can just click Ctrl Q. And you can see that my design has been updated correspondingly. So I have now 4 drawers, and the size here has been changed. So, but you can see that it's not the ideal way for our users to input those parameters, right? So you need to kind of navigate to the sketch. You need to make sure to enter this value correctly. So you cannot control limits here. So I presume that there is a certain limits on the height of this drawer. So how to make it better, how to improve the experience. And here where another tool available in all versions of SolidWorks will come handy, and it's called Configuration Publisher. So let me activate a configuration tab, and in here, I can just call the Configuration Publisher command. And the first message, it will ask you to create design table. So if you have one, you can just reuse it. Otherwise, it can create it for you. So in my case, I'm just going to create it from that pop-up. And I just need to select the parameters I'm going to drive. And here, what I mentioned will be quite handy to have everything in the sketches. So I can just safely select those parameters from the layout sketches. And that is going to be added to my design table. And once it is done, I can now build a user interface which is going to drive those parameters. So rather than user open design table and enter parameters here, we can have a nice number box, list box, check box to actually drive those parameters. So for example, I'm just going to drop numeric control here. and I can just associate that with my parameters, such as width. And I can give it a friendly name, and I also can specify the minimum, maximum, as well as increment. So I'm just going to close that for now because I already have a version of that assembly which has this interface field. So we're just going to save some time. So let me just open that assembly. And let me just activate that configuration manager. And you will see that there are controls here, and I can specify a minimum and maximum. And I can also have a drop down. So for example, for my drawers, I want to control it with a predefined set of values rather than just give users an option to enter any value. I also want to point that you can preview how it's going to look. But another cool feature is that configuration publisher is actually compatible with Solidworks 3D Content Central. So if you're going to upload your design to 3D Content Central, your users will be able to use that interface to actually download the correct size of your model, which is pretty cool. So how can we use that? So unfortunately, the only way to use it from within Solidworks is to insert that assembly to another assembly. So let me just show that. So I'm just going to activate new assembly. And now I can just drop that component. And you can see that similar to Toolbox, I have a nice property manager page, but I can just enter the parameters I want to use. For example, 600. So I just want to also point attention, if I enter parameter outside of the bounds, I'm just going to have a warning, which is pretty nice. So let me do 600, and drawer width, let it be 600, and number of drawers, for example, 4. So when I click green tick, it is going to generate new configuration for me in a design table. And this is how it's going to apply those dimensions to this component. So you can see there is a bit of a flickering. Excel is opened, but you have a result at the end. All right, so this is a part to automate your design using SolidWorks design tables and configuration publisher. Of course, you can build more complex formulas within Excel if your design will be a bit more complicated than this one. So Bill, I just wanted to hand it to you.
Artem,
yes.
Can I ask a couple of questions first?
Of course.
Yeah. Using that technique, are you able to change the door handles?
Yes, it's a good question, Bill. So basically, I could answer yes. So design table can also drive this suppression state of the components. So you can insert as many handle types as you want and just drive the suppression based on your input parameters. But as you can imagine, if you have quite a lot of variations, that will quickly make your model to look a bit busy and also could affect performance.
Okay, all right. So how sophisticated can it be? You've got the drawers there. So you've got two outside doors and a middle section with drawers and another door. Could they be swapped around, for example?
Yeah, so this one probably, this is a point where I would say that a design table and configuration publisher is not a good option for this complex automation requirements. So in this case, we should rely on some other techniques such as DriveWorks or Solidworks API.
Okay, all right,
so
thank you.
I think at this stage, I would just hand it over to you, Bill, so you can show how we can use DriveWorks to handle those design automations in a different way.
Okay, thanks, Artem. That was awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll show you DriveWorks now. Now, I just realized or just thought that maybe some of you don't know what DriveWorks is. So DriveWorks is a third-party for software for SolidWorks. There are 3 modules that I'll come to in a minute, but let me just start and give you an idea of how it works, how they all work, even all 3 modules. So the first thing you would do is you would capture the data inside SolidWorks that you want to control or you want to drive, hence the name DriveWorks. So I'll show you later how to do that. You then build some rules and logic in DriveWorks modules themselves that link back to the information that you've captured inside SolidWorks. And then you run the project. By running a project, I mean you see the forms you've created and that you enter the data you want, and that data is then fed back into SolidWorks, and SolidWorks generates the new models for you. Now, having described how that sequence works, I'm actually going to show it to you in the reverse order. I'm going to run the project first because I think it's better for you to see the end product so you know what it can do. Then I'll go back and show you just briefly, because it's pretty involved, just briefly how to build the logic and rules. And then I'll show you the idea of capturing the information back in SolidWorks. So really quickly, just so you know, DriveWorks, the company, they're a UK-based company. They started back in 2001. So they're very well established and a highly successful company, really good to work with. And all three modules of products that I've mentioned are gold partners with SolidWorks. Now, I keep mentioning these three bits of software, so I thought I should at least tell you about them. So DriveWorks Express is the introductory level. It's been included in every version of SolidWorks, every copy of SolidWorks since 2008. So if you have SolidWorks, you have DriveWorks Express, even if you don't know it. So it is possible for you to start tinkering with design automation, no extra cost. You already have the software, you just have to learn how to use it. Next one, I should mention that Express can drive parts and assemblies and drawings in your SolidWorks. Solo is the more powerful version. It's a separate bit of software that you have to get. By the name Solo, it's designed for one person. It runs inside their SolidWorks. It also automates your parts, assemblies, and drawings. It has more functionality to do that. It can also drive XML-based documents. So we're getting a bit of outside pure SolidWorks by now. And look, it probably has about 80% of the design capabilities, the design automation capabilities of Pro. So Pro is the big one, the flagship product. It's modular. There's 4 main modules there. Administrator, that's the one in which you create the system. You design the forms, you write the rules, you capture the data in SolidWorks, you create the whole system in Administrator. Autopilot is the module that connects between DriveWorks and SolidWorks. So when you've created the system in Administrator, you punch in the data, Autopilot passes it into SolidWorks and tells SolidWorks what to do. Now, you can also access this on the web. So DriveWorks Live is the web version or web module. It's available to anybody. If you grant them access, just like a normal web page, it could be on a laptop, computer, iPhone, iPad, anything at all, any device that supports a browser. And then people could actually design their own product and then submit it to you for approval, perhaps. And user is not used so often these days, but it's designed for an individual person inside a company. Could be a designer, doesn't have to run with SolidWorks. So you could have people who know enough to actually enter data and to, again, generate some models, and it might then get approved by the engineer. I think I was going to, so I'll go pop in and I'll show you how that works now. So let me just flick across into my setup for DriveWorks Live. So you'll see here, I'm in the browser. I have DriveWorks Live running. The first thing you'll notice is I have to log in. So you have security. You can define who can log in, and when they do log in, you can define what they can and can't do. So that's obviously really good. So at this point, it would list all your projects. I only have one for this presentation, so it's called Cabinet. So we'll look at that one. And up will come the form that I have created for this presentation. So the idea here is to show you this is the end result. This is what the user would see, the operator would see. You can see there's sort of buttons over here. You can see they highlight, just some text up here, all completely controllable by me, the designer, the DriveWorks person. I have an image here, and I can drive that image. So I've got all these controls over here. Cabinet width, like to increment it, and you'll see it gets longer. I can drag it here. And so I'm getting instant feedback as to whether what I'm entering is in fact correct. And a bit like the design table, I have limits. I can't go beyond 2400 wide. So I can't type in something bigger than that. In fact, I can't even type in. I'm just entering data this way. increments or slider bar. Height, likewise, I can control the height to suit whatever I want. Number of drawers. Again, I can't put too many in. I can't put too few in because I've got logic behind on the system telling me that. So as an example, if I had a maximum height and I see I could have 7 drawers. But now I'm not thinking, I think, oh, well, no, that's a bit too high. So I'll just drop that back down by a bit back to 1 meter. And you'll see it's gone down to 6. I can't have 7 drawers now because the system has decided, based on my logic and my rules, that if I had 7 drawers, they'd be too small. So you can have that sort of stuff built in, and that's a really good way of doing things. But then, of course, you can just override that down within the limits. I asked the question of Artem whether with design tables these sections here could be moved around. In DriveWorks, you can. Again, logic and rules are put in place, and I can just say I'd like to switch them around, please. So it switched around. So it's as simple as that. Once it's set up, people can't make mistakes. They just put in what is relevant. I can change my door types to whatever you think looks nicest. It's nice and simple and plain there, I think. Handles. So I just have images. I'm just clicking. It's simple clicking. I don't have to worry about things. I've got a limited choice here. Choose what I want. What material am I after? I've got previews of how it looks. I can put it onto the actual model. And so I can see the design as I'm going. I can also even set it up to have 3D. So here's my 3D object. Zoom in and out. Get a good feel for it in 3D. Flick back to 2D whenever I want to. The idea of DriveWorks is you don't have to have Solidworks at this point. I'm in a browser. But if it's set up properly within the system, I'm saying, okay, I'm happy with that. I can now release that. Now, what I would normally do is try and show you this. So if I release this, let me just check my Solidworks. Nice little window here. Okay. So let's release that. So it's been released. That word release can be changed. I can actually edit all that, of course. And you can see now that it's started to generate individual components of the cabinet. So the beauty of this, however, is while it's doing that, I can flick back over to my form, my DriveWorks Live, and I can run another one. So because it's web-based, multiple people could be doing this at the same time. I could come back in and say, well, this time I want a really small one. I just want of that side, yeah. I'd like a different door type. There, different door handle, different material. So I can be doing all this while SolidWorks is doing its work. I've got the 3D option here still, so I can have a look at what's there. So I'm sort of effectively multitasking. I could release this one, and that will then go off and be processed by SolidWorks as well in turn. So, and that could be set up for people from anywhere in the world to come in and start to pre-configure or pre-order almost your products.
Well, it looks pretty awesome, Bill. I'm just wondering, so what sort of limitations this product have? Where would you personally do not recommend to go with DriveWorks for design automation?
Okay, good question. It's often asked. The big thing with DriveWorks is it works with existing models. So you're creating a variation of the existing model. So if the sort of work you do is one-offs or short runs of something where they only do a handful of them perhaps, and so it's almost unique design each time, then DriveWorks is not for you. It's where you're automating something over and over and over again. In this case, a cabinet, hopefully you're selling hundreds of thousands of cabinets, each with slight variations, so the customer can get exactly what they want, but it's essentially the same structure. So,
Yep.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, now while it's doing all that, let's just have a quick look at what's behind the scenes. So back here, we're into the forms, or you can see what looks vaguely like what you saw on the web. This is DriveWorks Administrator. This is the module in which you create everything. So this is the main form that I've used. Over here, you can see there's what's called a frame control. This actually allows me to display forms within forms. Now I can run a test mode here. You'll see it looks a bit more now like what you saw. And I can click on things and I can get things changing while I'm developing it. You'll notice a few things up here disappeared. If I come out of test mode, so I can have some little controls up here purely for development purposes. And up here, these are all what we call controls. These are all the things you can use on the form, ranging from a calendar, you pick a date. You've got option buttons, slider bars that you saw, pictures, was it combo box? There's a couple of dozen of them there. So you can create really, really sophisticated and clever forms. I mentioned security, where you have to log in. So up here, you can create a team and add users and define the limits of what they can and can't do. If you're into programming, good word here, you don't need to be a programmer to use DriveWorks. There's no coding involved, but in the programming sense, you can define constants and variables to help you write your rules. You can define different sorts of tables, which I haven't had to use with this one. I can drive documents. So, for example, I can drive Excel documents, Word documents, JSON documents, etc. I can send emails, also very clever things. These are the model rules. This is where you link the data on the forms with what you captured in SolidWorks. So, for example, the door. So we're controlling the door width, the door height, the thickness. There's a plane in there to help position the handles and so on. I'm driving the material of the door. So these are the sorts of things that you write. These are the rules that you write. And this is all done in a simple, what's called a rule builder. And this is basically very similar to Excel formulas. If you can do Excel formulas, you can do these rules. They are very, very similar. I'm not going to go into any detail. There's too much involved. One thing I will show you, though, or two things. You can write macros, but macros in DriveWorks tend to be very visual. They're not coding, you're not typing in information in. You're creating little modules and connecting them together. And lastly, there's a built-in workflow. The green state here is when you're entering data into the forms. At that point, I could save the form and come out later on. I could get into a pending mode. I could complete it. I could set this up so that perhaps an apprentice who's not allowed to generate models, they can fill in the form, but then submit it for an engineer to approve. So you can have approval states in here. So it can become very, very involved, but very detailed, and it can mimic the workflow that you use within your business. So that's a really, really quick overview of DriveWorks Administrator. And I mentioned DriveWorks, SolidWorks Admin. Let's look at SolidWorks. So if I look at, I'll look at the other one, the first one we did. It's in the specifications here. So these are the models that I just made. So there's the model that I just created. All the individual panels. Everything's done to the dimensions that I put in, 2100 wide it was, and so on. So that's been modeled in SolidWorks for me. Now, what I mentioned before, the concept of a master model. So just need to move the pictures down here. I'll just log back into my group. And this is my master cabinet. So you can see it looks different to what I just generated. It's got multiple handles in there. I've set things up so that I just suppress and unsuppress what I do and don't want. And if I was to open up, for example, a door, then I'll be able to see in this door that I've captured over here information that I want to drive in DriveWorks. So for example, the door width was that dimension. Now it's as simple as if I can display the dimension somehow. So for example, if I see a dimension and I click on it, it tells me it's already captured as door height. So it's very simple to use. I can click on it. Maybe I wanted to not always have this, or perhaps to drive this this chamfer. If I can see the dimensions of the chamfer, I click on the 10. Down here, I could put in here chamfer width, perhaps. Add that, and I now have a new dimension with which I can control inside DriveWorks. So I could now write a rule, add it to my form, and I could control how big the actual chamfer of the door is.
Yep. So thank you, Bill. Looks pretty impressive. I just have a couple of questions. So you talked about the master model. So I'm wondering what sort of work you need to do to the master model, or I can just use any model as my master to drive to use it in DriveWorks.
Thanks for asking, Artem. That's a good thing to ask, because because DriveWorks is pushing or driving SolidWorks, the philosophy behind DriveWorks is to work with bottom-up assemblies. So if you have top-down assemblies, there'll already be relations in there that DriveWorks can't work with. So you can get away with some sort of single-level top-down assembly modeling, but it's preferable to have it purely bottom-up, if at all possible. So that's a bit. I don't think it's a limitation. It's just a bit of a requirement. And so, worst case, if you went down the DriveWorks path, you may have to do a bit of remodeling of your master assembly. Yep.
Thank you, Bill. It's just cool. And also, I noticed that you quite a few modules involved here, right? So you have security, user management, you have a web interface, web previews, 3D, 2D. So my question is, approximately on average, what is the lead time to a project within DriveWorks for some automation?
In terms of developing it? Okay, yes. Look, to be honestly, we're talking months, not weeks. Of course, it depends on how complex it is. If you were doing something simple, for example, this cabinet here took me about 3 days. And that was completely from scratch. The model didn't exist, so we did everything. So people would already have their models. But realistically, if you had a more serious project in mind, where more options than I have, and perhaps you were including documents as well, and maybe sending emails, then we're starting to talk months of development. So it's not a quick fix. But of course, once you get it done, from that point on, the next design you do might take a quarter of the time, less, a tenth of the time that you're taking to do it manually. So that's where you start to get the return on investment. The other thing to be aware of course, is that you don't have to automate the entire assembly. You could automate parts of the assembly. If you felt the assembly was going to take too long to automate, we'll just automate part of it to begin with. So it might, with a few clicks of a button on a form, you generate parts of the assembly in a very quick time, and then you do the rest of it manually. And over time, you add more and more automation to it. So you can sort of creep up on it. So here are 2 websites that you could look at for DriveWorks. DriveWorks.co.uk is their company website, and DriveWorksLive.com will show you a whole bunch of examples of how you could set DriveWorks up to run on the web and the results you can get from it. So now I'll pass it back over to Artem to have a look at the SolidWorks API. Artem.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, and the last part of our presentation is design automation using SolidWorks API. Just a very quick introduction what API is. So API stands for Application Programming Interface, and the keyword here is programming. So what that means is the way to use programming languages to automate your SolidWorks. So when you, in SolidWorks, as a user, you click buttons, you do selections, so you communicate to your SolidWorks via user interface. In a very similar way, you can use programming language to communicate to your SolidWorks. And there are multiple types of applications which can be created based on SolidWorks API. So probably the most common one, and most likely you have used at least one time in your work, is macros, VBA macros. more sophisticated options as something like add-ins and standalone executables. So for example, DriveWorks itself is Solidworks Admin, which is using an application programming interface to build those models. So, and in this demo, I'm just going to show how Solidworks API and Solidworks Admin can be used to create some automation. So we just changed the scope a little bit and show some alternative way of design automation. So in the builds demo, users have to log into website and enter the parameters from there. So in demo, using Solidworks API, I'm just showing the way where users actually log into website and downloading Solidworks assembly into their machine and could configure it directly from there, Solidworks. So let's say that we have some small company who are producing the cabinets, and we have a website where user can go and download the model, open it in SolidWorks, configure it, and order that from there directly. And also our models are driven by SQL database, so where we have some predefined components. So for example, panel, doors, etc. So when user configures their models, some of those sizes could be standard sizes, so they can just order a ready-to-go model, or we can also support the customized sizes. So first thing the user should do is just download assembly from the website. And just let me just open that in my download folder. I'm just going to unzip it. So just a simple SolidWorks assembly, the one which you already saw. And I'm just going to open that in SolidWorks. So first thing I want to point your attention is this assembly is using a bottom-up design approach, so similar to the one used in DriveWorks. So if I go to equations, you can see there are no equations here. And if I go to find references, you can see there is no external relations in my part to assembly. And also, you may notice that in this assembly, I have a new feature in my feature manager tree called cabinet. So this is not a standard feature in SolidWorks. This is something which Solidworks API allows to do. And I can just click edit feature, which is going to bring me the customized interface where user could enter the parameters in the nice property manager page. So as you would expect, you can just over the mouse over the controls to see what that's for. So for example, I want to set 1800 millimeters here, maybe 800 millimeters here. And you can see that this order page here showing me all of components I will need to order in order to make that design, and they have an icons in the status. So this one is saying there's out of stock. This one say it is a custom size. And for example, door says it is a standard size and it is available in our stock. So once I configure the option, so maybe also want to change the type of the handle, and I'm just going to click a green tick here. And what it's going to do is now just going to employ Solidworks API to set those parameters in my model. So you can see after a short while, my model has been updated correctly, my handles have been changed, and you can see that all of the parameters have been applied. And what I also want to show that some cool features that Solidworks API can do for you is you can actually drive that with a dimension. So if I just double click on that feature, just like any similar feature in SolidWorks, you have a dimension that you could change. So for example, if I want to change the depths, I can just go here, put, let's say 700, click green tick, and this is just going to update my model accordingly. So you can see that this model has been updated. And also, this happened without any top-down design, although that actually looks like it is a top-down design, but it's actually not. So let's now show a little bit more. So I told you that these parameters are based on SQL table. So now let me just open that SQL table management, just a simple table for this demo. And let's say that I'm just going to change the parameters of my design table. So in here we have a column for in stock, which just tells whether this parameter in stock or not. So if you remember, I have pointed your attention that the door was in stock. So let me just change that and set it to 0, which basically means that it is out of stock now. So, and if I now open that design table again, you can see that now that door says it is out of stock. So you can see you have an immediate live feedback from our SQL database to drive the design. So once I'm happy with all of the input parameters and I'm ready to order that design, I can just click order, and this just redirects me to a page where I can just process and buy that furniture. So this is just an example which demonstrates how SolidWorks API could help you to automate your designs. So, Bill, do you have any question?
Yeah,
Yes?
can I jump in? Just a question there. So, how long would it take you to write something like that?
Yes, it's similar to DriveWorks, right? So it kind of depends what work you have. So one of the things that when you develop in applications, you running through certain cycle, right? So you do development and you do testing and so on and so forth, and that could actually take months. All of this stabilization period could take months, especially if you want to build some complex features such as web interface, 3D interface and something like that. So I would say that we're talking about several months to build some sophisticated project.
Okay, so now another question, if I may. I've written some macros. People say I know just enough to be dangerous with macros. So what's the difference between a macro and an add-in?
Yeah, it's a good question. So basically, both of those are just a type of applications which could be used to customize your SolidWorks and to drive some parameters of your SolidWorks. And in general, macros are a bit simpler ways to communicate, and they are limited in a way. And also, they could be quite hard to maintain. So if you're building some simple automation, macros still good, I would say. But if you want to build something a bit more sophisticated, something more long term, especially if you want to run some updates later, you know that you're going to change your tool. I would definitely recommend going with SolidWorks add-ins, and those are way more stable and sophisticated.
Excellent, thank you. Look, that was absolutely amazing, Artem. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you very much. And I think we are ready here to wrap up. So I'm just want to show the very last slide about the comparison matrix. So we just put together some information about three methods here. As a summary, all of them have their advantages and disadvantages. All of them very handy and capable of doing certain design automations. And it's just up to you to decide which one is better for you. So Bill, do you want to slightly comment on that, add a few words?
Yeah, there's not a great deal to say, Artem. You've covered that nicely. As you can see, design tables have less functionality. That doesn't mean they're not good. It just means that they have their place. There's a couple of gaps for API and DriveWorks. Again, they have their applications. This was just our idea of a very brief matrix to give people a feel for the differences between them, and hopefully get them thinking, at least that they know more about it now, and then they can start to think about it and perhaps use one or more of these products.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill. And just if you have any questions, if you want to get a bit more information about the methods we used in our demo, so please do not hesitate to contact myself and Bill, and you can see our details below. And I'm just going to pass it back to our organizers so they can continue SLUGME event. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Bill, for joining our presentation.
Thank you, Artem. Bye for now.
Bye.